Let's get into it now. A spoiler-free review of Avatar: The Way of Water, and I will be the first to admit to you I had very low expectations going into this movie. I'm not even the biggest fan of the original Avatar, and 13 years later, it was hard for me to really have that much excitement going into this movie, and I also think the trailer did a pretty bad job at hyping you up. It almost made it seem like it was going to be a very boring movie. I didn't know what kind of action to expect. And then you add in the 3-hour and 10-minute runtime. It felt daunting going into watching this movie. It also felt like a hard sell at a more casual Avatar fan to want to commit that much time, because it is a big time investment. And I have no problem watching a long movie, but it has to be something that I'm really interested in. And some people have asked me, do you need to watch part 1 in order to get part 2? I don't really think you necessarily have to. It had been probably a year now that I rewatched Avatar. I've forgotten some things, but going into this one, there are so many new characters, and there's just so much more happening in this movie. It feels a little bit self-contained. Yes, because some of the backstory of why they are fighting. Yes, having the first one would clarify those things, but I don't feel like you would be completely lost going into watching the sequel without seeing the first one. Because again, that's a lot of time to commit. If you're going to go just watch the second one, then you got to watch another almost 3-hour movie. But what this movie is about, you have Jake from the original Avatar. He now has a family. And after defeating all the Sky People in the original movie, now the Sky People are coming back, and you have that main villain from the first one back, but now he is an Avatar. He is big and blue and has an entire crew, has an entire army going to find Jake and his family, and they just want to kill him. So once Jake and his family figure this out, they decide they need to go find a new home far, far away. And they go and find this other tribe in these very remote islands where they start to live with them. And they are water people. So it's them having to adapt to their culture, being kind of picked on because they don't look like them. They don't have the swimming abilities like they do, and having to fit in here while just mainly keeping their family safe. And then you have this big evil military guy trying to find and kill them. And that's really the entire movie. It's a very simple plot. And I actually think the story of Avatar and the characters work so much better in water. I like them in the ocean. I just feel like the visuals there and the action just is a little bit more magical. And this movie feels like an adventure. It feels like a journey. And the visuals in this movie are unlike anything I've really seen. And I know that was such a big deal with the original one. And I didn't watch the sequel in 3D. I just couldn't put myself through 3 hours of that. And really the 3D only adds like another layer of depth. I don't really think I needed that. Plus I already wear glasses. I didn't want to wear 3D glasses over that. I felt like I would be very uncomfortable. But I don't think I really missed out on a whole lot. Just having this entire story take place on this big screen, I felt like that did the movie justice enough. I really can't compare the look of this movie to anything I've ever seen aside from the original one. It kind of makes all the visual effects in any superhero movie look very subpar. And I have to say, it genuinely felt like I was a part of this world. Like I was in the water. Like I was a part of the action. So that is all credit to the cinematography here. So I'll say it is probably an easy shoo-in that this one will win an Oscar for cinematography, for art design, and will more than likely get a nod at Best Picture. I really felt like this was everything I look for going into watching a movie. It just spoke to that experience. And even though I'm not a fan of the franchise, I've come to find there are a lot of people who really love this movie. They're just not very vocal about it. And that fan base shows in the numbers. The movie has already done in its first weekend $434 million. And $300 million of that is the international box office. And I really think that is what James Cameron goes for in this movie, getting it translated to all these languages. And because the movie is pretty simple, because the plot line is very easy to follow along with, I feel like that really translates into an international audience. And At times, I feel like this movie is a little bit corny, but maybe when you're translating this and trying to make sure that the most people can watch and understand it, it's gonna feel a little bit corny. So for me, that corniness did take me out of it just a little bit. But it wasn't anything super distracting that I thought that it was ridiculous in any sense. Another question I got is this movie appropriate for kids? I know a lot of kids have watched the original one on Disney Plus and now want to go see the second one. And I would say if they watched and enjoyed the first one and you were good with everything that that movie had, this movie is much of the same when it comes to the violence, when it comes to the language. There was an F-bomb in this one. So is The Way of the Water appropriate for kids? I would say yes. One thing I wasn't expecting is the Avatar people in this movie to be a little bit more sexual because they are basically naked throughout this entire movie. Yes, they are blue fictional characters. I am aware of that as a 31-year-old man. But if instead of 31, I was 13 and saw these half-naked blue people running across the screen, I think I would feel a little bit differently. They're oddly a little bit more sexual than I was expecting. So there are a lot of perfectly sculpted humans and blue people in this movie. And now when it comes to James Cameron, I don't think I'm as quick to write him off anymore. He's proved it again and again. And what I really just enjoy about his work is the scale of all his movies. I see glimpses of all his other work in this movie, from Titanic to True Lies to Terminator. I think he just likes movies with T's in them. And not only that, but this movie was better than its predecessor. And I didn't see that coming. One that I thought nobody was really asking for. One that I thought I was going to go into and come out ripping this movie. I ended up enjoying it an awful lot. And I had been questioning his plans to make Avatar 3, 4, and 5, thinking he was setting himself up for failure and setting himself up for a box office bomb. And knowing how much money this movie has to make in order to be profitable, but I already see it doing that. But hands down, my favorite part in the first one was the final battle scene. James Cameron knows how to make a third act. This one delivers even more so in that final battle scene. All three acts are basically an hour, but that last hour was very intense. I also just kind of have an affinity with the ocean. Like, my favorite animal of all time are orca whales. So seeing all of the underwater stuff and seeing all of the battle scenes and combine those two things, like, that was a lot of fun. The hardest part of watching this movie is it becomes kind of hard to feel empathetic towards these characters because they are so cartoon-like. There's also just not that much dialogue, so it's really hard to flesh out some of these characters to get to a point to make you feel emotional throughout this movie. So it really only has just a hint of emotion. Maybe I thought it was going to take it up to another level there. But at the core of this story, I don't feel like it's entirely that original. The first one was very Dances with Wolves. This one is probably more Pocahontas. And I know the reason James Cameron is so passionate about making these movies is because of the overarching message. The first one was more of saving the rainforest, saving the jungles, that type of angle. This one moves it over to a different environment, and there's some overtones of, wanting to conserve marine life and keeping that entire ecosystem in balance. So you have the mean sky people tearing that down and being the bad guys here. So that is his little message in this movie. But after watching this one and feeling really good about it, I'm in for Avatar 3. Maybe they move that one to an entirely different terrain. So I'm no longer going to be ruling out James Cameron. I'm ready to paint my face blue and head into Avatar 3. But again, because it's not completely original, I think there could have been a little bit more to the story, which is saying a lot because it is a 3-hour movie. And it feels like 3 hours. I took this movie in chunks, and I was like, all right, if I can get through this hour, I'll be good. I took one bathroom break throughout the entire thing, so I felt pretty good about that. So I don't entirely see the reason for making this movie 3 hours. I think it could have easily been under 240. And I will say this, if you are hesitant to watch it because of the long runtime, never go to a movie at the time that it says it's going to start. That is the time that the preview starts. So say you're going to a 7 o'clock showing. I usually don't show up until 7:18, 7:20. That's usually when the movie is going to start. So save yourself those 20 minutes. Do not add on more time if you're going to go watch Avatar. I went in, it was daytime, I came out, it was nighttime. It was a very weird feeling. So it's a major time commitment for something you're not super passionate about. That is really the only reason here I would feel like it would benefit more and get more people inclined to go see it if it wasn't over 3 hours. But hey, credit to him for sticking to that runtime. But when it comes to the score, I would give Avatar: The Way of Water 4 out of 5 wooden spears.